sorry. So so reading Jeremiah 29:11, thinking, wow, this verse is just very timely. 2020 was trash. Like, we had this pandemic, we had this horrible election season, we had like people losing their jobs, like you name it, people sick, people dying, everything that could go wrong in 1 year literally seemed. And then on top of that, some notable figures like Kobe Bryant, um, Chadwick Boseman, like just some really prominent people. Alex from Jeopardy died. Just tragic. And so it's really great to read that verse and to feel assured that God has a plan for you. And so my first question of the night is, when you hear Jeremiah 29:11 and 12, we're going to focus on 11 and 12 tonight, even though I read 13. But when you hear Jeremiah 29:11 and 12, what do you think that verse is saying to you? Don't all rush at one time.
Basically, you don't have to stress out. You don't have to fear, because I'm God. I know what I'm doing. Like, I have your life mapped out. Like, yeah.
Any
Also, it doesn't really say it in there, but like he knows, even the bad stuff, he knows what's going on, and and yet still, there are plans in place for us to prosper. There are good plans in place, kind of like, um, um, all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord, and so, that it kind of makes me think of that verse, that regardless of what's going on, um, it's still going to turn out good for us.
Okay.
So when I think about that verse, I think about, look, sis, what you think you want to do is let that alone, because God has it all figured out. He has it in place. He has it intact. And although we can have aspirations, we can have goals, we can have dreams, he just reminds us that everything that you need is already mapped out. There's a pathway, a roadmap to whatever it is that you want to do, what he has designed for you to do. So it just kind of assures me that what I'm tripping for, what I'm worried about.
So what if I told you that verse, we take that verse out of context quite often? What would you like? What is your response when I tell you that we take that verse out of context? Because we do.
I'm not surprised, because we take a lot of verses out of context, but that's neither here nor there.
It's actually slightly heartbreaking how many times we've been lied to in the church, but it's fine. We'll talk about that another day. But I think it's very important context, and maybe that's going to be the theme of the year, about getting context, because getting the context of this verse is really altering. And while it is God making a promise that like the future is going to be one of a prosperous one, and that the troubles that you've endured now are not going to be the troubles that you endure in the long run, it is said in a different capacity. And so the context is, Jeremiah is a prophet. And so Jeremiah is the one that's writing this book. And he is a prophet. He's known as the weeping prophet, because all of the things that he says that will come to pass do come to pass. And a lot of them are he's a lot of Jeremiah. I've spent all day reading Jeremiah, and he is just the teller of really sad things, because people never listen to him. And so they call him the weeping prophet, because once all of the things that he said would come to pass, when he tried to give people a warning so that they could change their lives for the better, and they don't, they're subject to what he said would happen. But the cool thing about Jeremiah that we can all relate to on this call is that Jeremiah is young. And so maybe he's like, we can just call him like the young adult prophet, because, why not? So the context is that the Israelites, Jeremiah is talking to the Israelites, and they are in exile. And so they have been put into exile by God, as a punishment by God, as a result of their disobedience. And so everything that they could have done wrong, they did wrong. God told them, don't worship other idols, and that's exactly what they did. God said, don't put yourself before people. That's exactly what they did. So everything that God told them not to do, they did it, and found ways to try to justify them doing it, which is really funny, because that's exactly how life is today, even though we have a book that tells us what we shouldn't do. So God exiles them into Babylon, which is just this, this horrible place. And so in the midst of, going to chapter 28, in the midst of their exile, there is a man named Hananiah, who claims to be a prophet on behalf of God. And let me back up. This exile that God has sentenced the Israelites to is for 70 years. So God says, I'm going to send you into this place of like complete dissatisfaction for 70 years. And so Hananiah comes in chapter 28 and tells them, actually, God said, your troubles will be over in 2 years, and that he will make everything great, and that, life is going to be fine. You're going to come out of this very hard place. You're going to be able to go back into the land that you want to go into in 2 years, not the 70. And so Jeremiah is like witnessing this and tells them that if God told you this, then it has to come true. But because I know it didn't, that's not going to happen. And you'll be punished by God for lying in his name. Because Hananiah tells the people, all of the priests, all of the prophets, all of the people that are in this place where he's saying this, he tells them, that, this is what God has told me to tell you, that your troubles will be over in 2 years, and that, your situation will change. And because of that, and Jeremiah tells him, you are so very wrong for doing that. He dies. And so now we skip over all the way over into chapter 29. So Israelites, 70 years, Babylon exile. Hananiah is already dying because he's already dead, because he told the people a lie in the name of Jesus, that their troubles will be over in 2 years versus the 70. But what's happening in in chapter 29 is very interesting. And so Jeremiah is being told by God what to say to God's people, well, to the Israelites. And in that's where we get Jeremiah 29 and 11. And basically throughout this whole chapter, God is telling them, you're going to go through your 70 years. I told you 70, I'm going to give you 70. But once your 70 is up, this is what your life will be like. Once you've gone through this punishment that I've given you, you'll be, your future will be better. Your future will be brighter. So, this is what you have to look forward to, but you got to go through this, what I've said you got to go through in the meantime. But when you think about, and I guess I kind of skipped over, and let me traffic back. When we think about Hananiah, there are a lot of Hananiahs that exist. There are a lot of Hananiahs that tell people things that they want to hear all day, every day. I like to think of them as Peter Popoffs that tell you to buy miracle water, and, $100,000 checks are going to come in the mail. Problematic, because that's crazy. God does miracles, but to sell people some water and to make them think that that's going to be their scenario every time they consume this water is problematic. And to do it in Jesus' name is what the issue is, surely. And we get a warning by God by way of scripture about what happens if you lie in his name. You literally should be punished by way of death for doing such a thing. And that's just crazy. And so we see false prophets all the time, fill people with hope and fill them excitement, or even ask them to give their last with the expectation that, God will instantly change. And that, again, is not that God can't, it's not that God won't, but if God has not called you to say these things, if God has not told you to tell this person that in 3 days their life is going to get better, don't tell them in 3 days their life is going to get better, because it sets them up for failure. And that is very dangerous to do, especially to new believers. So it's really easy to create this narrative. It's also really easy to create this narrative that once you begin to follow Christ, all in life will be well. And, you were in the darkness, and the other side is rainbows, really good green evergreen grass. There are beautiful carnation flowers all in the front yard. There are rose bushes that are just planted. Like, it's just so beautiful. It's really easy to kind of fall into that narrative, because a lot of times we see in churches, especially, that, we make it seem as though the end all be all is to just, follow Christ, and that everything that you're enduring in that moment will be done. And so I would caution us as a whole. I guess the first tidbit or point for the night is to be mindful of the things that you say in your capacity as a Christian or as a believer of Christ, because people will actually follow you and they will hold on to the things that you say, because they know that you are a believer. And if they feel like there's weight that comes with the positions that we're in. Each of us are leaders in some capacity. Some of us are parents, some of us are wives, some of us are just dear friends and brothers. But people are in our circles believe that we have a connection with God. And so if we say, God said this, or listen to me now as I tell you how God is going to bless you, people will hold on to that. And so there is weight and there is power in the platforms that are given to you. And we have to be mindful of the platforms that we are positioned on so that we are not doing a disservice to not only God, but to the kingdom as a whole. I've been doing a lot of research lately, and I've just come to discover that people lose faith in the church, in the universal church, in the global church, whatever you want to call it, because they've been hurt by the wrongdoing, the unintentional wrongdoings of some. And so someone may have promised them this really great outcome and it didn't come to fruition, and they feel like God has abandoned them, when in all actuality, God was nowhere in the midst of that particular saying, that conversation, or that thought. And so the first, I guess, lesson or theme for the night is to be mindful of the platforms that you have, be mindful of the power that the platform that you have, and be mindful of the things that you say while you're on these platforms, because just as God is giving you a platform, he will strip it away from you. He may not kill you like he did Hananiah, but he will strip your power away from you. And it's also important to note that with our walk with Christ comes additional struggles. And I think that that's something we really do kind of great, like we graze over, and, we just say, oh, I'm just going through a tough time. But God has literally given us some not so subtle hints in the Bible. And so the first not so subtle hint is like that scripture that Sharice, shout out to Sharice, put on our Instagram page for James 1, 2, and 4, or I think you did 2 and 3. But it says, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For endurance is fully developed. You will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Let me start that over. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. And so how is that a subtle hint? It's telling us that our endurance needs to grow. It's telling us that our faith will be tested. Why on earth would God test our endurance? Why would he put us in a position where our faith needs to be tested? Or at least why would he tell us if that's not going to be the case? And we know that to be the case. If 2020 didn't do anything to us, it proved that James 2 and 4 was real in the flesh. Like, we are some really tried and true Christians, I think, based off of last year. Our faith was tested and our endurance, we made it. So our endurance is really strong out here. We're cross-country runners out here. But if that's not a hint, I think the next hint that we get is in James 16 and 33. And this is Jesus saying, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus literally tells us, you are going to go through some things. Your life is not going to be, peaches and cream and roses and flowers. You're going to be tested. Your faith is going to be tested. You probably will get angry. You probably will get pissed off or feel defeated or feel discouraged. But at the end of the day, you can rest in the fact that in knowing that I, Jesus, have overcome. I have justified you. I have saved you from the perils of your sin. I have made way for you to be able to go on to the other side, even though you're not truly deserving. And so I think that is truly, truly crazy how God gave us two very subtle hints, not subtle hints, but there's a whole Bible full of these hints. And so lean on those in your times of trouble. And when you find yourself in these predicaments where you want to try to encourage someone, don't tell them, life is going to be okay. You're a Christian. Tell them, you know what? You signed up for this, sis or bro. This is, you're in the ghetto. Welcome, but don't tell them they're in the ghetto. But tell them, you know what? This is a part of the journey, but it makes you better, because James 2:4 tells you that once you go through these journeys, once you become, your endurance is developed, once your faith is tested, you will become a perfect and complete person, needing nothing in the end. And so that is like the reward at the end, and knowing that all that you're going through, like Romans 8:28 says, all that you're going through, it serves a purpose. It has a reason. There is a reason, I'm just went blank, but there is a reason why you're going through what you're going through. It's not in vain. It's not because God has forgotten about you. It's not because God is not there. It's literally because it's a part of the process. It's a part of the journey. Because how can we tell people about our testimony if we've never been tested? How can we tell people about, having the faith the size of a mustard seed if you've never been in a situation where that's all that you had left? How can you tell people that God is a God of miracles and you've never had a miracle performed for you? And how can you tell people that God is great, like that God is awesome and God is all of these things, if you've never been in a position where that's all that you've had to like lean on, and that's all that you've had to get you over to the next side? So rest in the shore and know that God is there. So we've learned thus far that we should be careful with the platforms that we have, and that there's power in our platforms. And two, that even as we go through life, and even as we go through struggles, that there is a purpose behind them, and God has not forgotten, nor has he forsaken us. But in all of it, we will be developed into perfect people in his vision and in his eyesight. So going back to Jeremiah 29:11. So the thing before he shares his promise, Jeremiah shares the promise of God. He gives the Israelites, remember, they're in exile, 70 years, Babylon, wrongdoings, horrible life, the ghetto, the valley. He gives them this directive from God. Seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. So that's 29:7. So God has given them this directive that in your low point, in your exile, in your horrible place, I want you to make the best of it. I want you to, he tells them to be fruitful. He tells them to grow the land. He tells them to do, like, basically build a city over here. But they're in this they're in punishment. That's like your parents giving you a whooping and saying, but hey, it's okay. I know you're in pain, but just be happy, be good. And so, sorry, that was Pastor Davis. So like, that's crazy. And I just want to know, how would you all feel if God told you, or how have you felt that God has told you in your valley or in your low point or in your exile, in your punishment, to be fruitful and multiply and, farm the land and create a very beautiful life, even though it's dark? How would you feel? Don't jump all at once.
Like I'm being gaslit. Like, what you mean, bro?
Not that we're saying that God is gaslighting us, but I mean, that's
how I feel, I mean, I've been there and I get it, but just the way it sounds like gaslighting, but that's not how he operates.
That's true, but it's very crazy. Like, I think that for me personally, I think that I'm going through that right now. Like, I'm not gonna say I strongly dislike working for the city that I work for. I'm not gonna say the name. It is not a fun time. I don't feel like I'm being used to my greatest potential. And I just keep asking God, what did I do wrong that got me here? Like, what sin did I commit that I didn't realize that you have put me in this position of punishment? And every time that I try to leave, or every time an opportunity comes, it's either not the right opportunity or it's not where I need to be. And like, in the process, I felt like God has kind of told me, make the best of it, form these relationships, form these friendships that you have with people, impact lives, leave it better than what you came with, even though it's dark there, like the people are insane, politics are crazy, the city's crazy, we're in a pandemic, like it's just crazy. And so it's hard to like really trust God when he's telling you, when you're asking God, get me out of this. And he's saying, no, 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 no. You got some more time in the valley. But while you're there, go ahead and make it good. Get to decorating because you're going to be there for a minute. Nikki, I saw you came off mute, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything.
So I've definitely been in that season, Arnelle, where I felt like, God, what are you doing? Like, are you serious? But now I'm in a season of fruitfulness, and I am able to trust God and understand why he put me in situations that I was in, to where I saw darkness.
Yeah.
And so when darkness does occur, I'm able to say, okay, God, I've been here before. I've been in situations similar to this. And because you brought me through it, I know how to handle this. Yeah. Or I'm learning how to cope with it. And so my challenges and my darkness have become somewhat easier because God has allowed me to stay in places very similar to where you are in your career, where you're questioning, why am I still here? I want to grow, but your assignment is not complete. There's still more people who are aggressive, people who are envious of you, who you have to learn how to overcome and deal with, so that you are prepared for your due season and prepare for others that are even worse than who you are accustomed to now. So my darkness has truly tailored how I am able to cope with challenges now.
Come on, glory. Thank you, Dean. It's just so great to hear from you. You're just
good night,
astute and professional.
But you know what? And I'll say this too, if I can be candid. Yeah. Ruben, let me talk low just in case he's listening, which is good if he is listening. And for those who may not know, my husband is an introvert. Okay, he's very quiet. If he's in a room with two people, that's too many people for him. And so he is in a season of complacency where he is okay with just doing him. He's okay with the 9 to 5, and that's just what he's doing. And so I'm learning, although I'm not like that, I'm learning that is okay, to be complacent and to be yourself. But I encourage him to aspire towards greatness. But I wasn't able, and I'm not able to do that had it not been for God putting me in situations and me meeting people who are not for me, right? So I'll give you an example. When you're working with people, you have to manage different personalities. And people will smile in your face and they become backstabbers. But we have to learn how to manage those types of behaviors and personalities. And so because of that, it's easier for me to encourage him to not be so much of an introvert and to learn how to understand why people actually behave the way that they do. Right. And so our conversations have really strengthened because of those principles right there, and just using situations at work to help him cope with anxiety around being with people and being complacent.
Wow. I too am an introvert. It's not a fun time. I am a forced extrovert, but I feel him. And I feel maybe he's not being, well, you know your husband better than I do because I'm not married to him. But maybe the complacency is because of something else. And so, maybe it's deeper than that. But it's very easy to just kind of, especially when you're an introvert, to just kind of go to yourself and to feel like there's no one that really understands how you feel. But cling on to the Lord, for he's a good one. And this actually leads right into the next point, is that God knows all about our situations. He literally, and Sharice was all in my notes earlier, and I needed her to back up off my computer. But God is very knowing about all things, but he definitely knows about our situation. And so 29:7, God tells in chapter 29:7 of Jeremiah, God tells the Israelites to basically make this what it is, make it a good time, like pray to the Lord and he'll come to you. But you're going to stay here in this season. And that's not at all what they wanted to hear. They wanted to be told that they could come out of this place. They wanted to be told that their suffering was over, and that God's plan for them was to move now versus the 70 years that he originally gave them. Basically, they wanted God to like renege on what he had already said, and he's not a God that reneges. And so, it's like, but in doing that and understanding, so God is also giving them a future, and he's telling them like, this is what you can hold on to. You can hold on to Jeremiah 29:11, because in your suffering there is a purpose in it, and there's a plan afterwards, but your season has a purpose. And so God says, I know the thoughts that I think toward you, in some versions. And so of course, like, God is writing to the nation he's writing to the nation of Israel. He's writing to the Israelites that they, even though you're in captivity, even though, you don't think that I know that you're struggling, that you're in pain, that you don't want to be here, I know exactly how you feel. And not only do I know exactly how you feel, I know exactly what it's going to take to get you out of it. But you got to be here in that season. And so when he's finished, like, he'll change them for the better. He'll make it so that they remember what they've gone through, so that they don't go through it again. He'll make it to where they're going is so much better than where they've been, and they'll never want to like self-inflict that type of pain on them, because their struggles were literally self-inflicted. Jeremiah 1-29 is literally like chapter 1 verses, and all the way to chapter 29 is literally like straight up just warning signs from God, by way of Jeremiah telling them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. So their struggle was self-inflicted, but he's saying, if I put you in this place for 70 years, you will be forced to remember that all that you went through was not worth all that you had in that moment. And in fact, all that I have for you is worth so much more. And the 70 years that you did will be like, they'll be like water under the bridge, because you'll just be so grateful that we're, that far out in advance. And so God knew everything there was to know about the sufferings of the people. He knew about the wickedness of them. He knew what type of people they were. Nothing at all was hidden from him. And so we can even like kind of we can go to Job 23:10. And so the verse tells us that the Lord knew everything that was happening in the life of the servant Job. He knows all that's happening in your life as well. And so nothing that has ever come your way has ever taken the Lord by surprise. Nothing that you do will catch him off guard. It may catch you off guard because of his response, but nothing that you do is going to really just kind of like shake the table. Jesus shakes our table, we don't shake his table. And so you can also be reminded that Romans 8:28 like tells us that all that we're going through is for the good of for those that believe, even if we do it to ourselves. And that is very reassuring, because we are not perfect at all. We don't have it all together. We never will truly have it all together while we're here on earth, because we are sinful by nature. But to know that God is aware of this and still loves us in spite of, to know that God is still making plans for us to be prosperous in our future, regardless of what we're doing right now. We shouldn't take advantage of that, but we should be reminded of that. And so he knows all about it. He's there in the midst of it. God never left them while they were in exile. 70 years of punishment, he never left them, and gave them like reassurances throughout their time there, and told them, like, imagine being in exile and being able to have babies, have families, create basically your own mini town where you're supposed to be truly in punishment. Like, when I think of a punishment, I don't think that it's a place, like it's a time where life can come afterwards and growth can take place. I think of it as a time of just like death and silence. But no, that is not the case. God made it to where they could still be prosperous even in their valley. And so we can be reminded that he is in the midst of our struggle. He is in our dark places with us. And that even if it's a punishment given to us by God, he will never forsake us during that time. And not only that, he cares about what we are facing. He cared about them and knew that they were like struggling, knew that they were really crying out to him, trying to figure out why this was happening, holding on to the hope that maybe something would change. And yet he was still there. And I think that's part of the danger about representing Jeremiah 29:11 in this also positive light, is that we have to put it in context. For I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord. But he's telling this to people that he's put in a punishment place because of the things that they've done. And so that we need to tell people God has a plan for you, even if you're going through a season that is not fun, that's not positive, that's not, what you thought it would be, or that's self-inflicted and is a punishment by God. Like, we have to be reminded that God is going to be there for us, that God is there for us, and he's never forsaken us. And the plan for us to prosper still will come even when the season is over. And so not only does he care about what we're facing us, he's promised, grace to bring us through. He tells them after your 70 years is over, this is what you got. And so I think that is like very reassuring. That's very like great to know and to be able to hold on to. But I think the biggest thing for me, and this is my wrap up, the biggest lesson, or the main lesson, if you take nothing else away, is that the lesson in Jeremiah 29:11 is not that life will go according to, a struggleless plan or a struggleless journey that we've concocted in our mind, as long as we trust God. God does in fact have a plan for us to prosper in the future, but that doesn't make us exempt from the struggles now. And so Jeremiah 29:11 basically tells us to be resilient right now so that you can be prosperous later, to stay strong and to have faith even when the season is dark, even when the punishment feels too great, even when it feels like there's no end in sight, because what's coming after this is greater than what you're going through. And it's worth the nights that you cry, the nights that you go without sleep. It's worth it all, but you have to get through it. And you can hold on to Jeremiah 29:11 in those seasons of pain and suffering and sadness, because God will never leave us. He'll never forsake us. And after we've done so, he'll give us platforms to talk about it so that we too can be like Jeremiah's in a different capacity, in the sense that we can give people warnings about the things that we've done so that they cannot follow in the same footsteps as us, and they don't have to go through the same seasons that we've had to go through. They'll go through their seasons, but some of them don't have to be self-inflicted, like that of the Israelites having to be exiled in Babylon. And so lastly, we just need to learn to push through as we cling to the promises that he's made. And that, my friends, is all that I have for you tonight. Oh, this awkward silence is not fun. Feel free to take yourself off mute.
That was good.
Oh. Y'all know I don't like awkward.
Amen. You did that.
Amen.
That was
What a
beautiful.
wonderful word. Thank
That
you,
was
Arnelle.
beautiful.
Oh
Thank
my
you,
God.
Pastor
Yeah.
Arnelle Wood.
Okay. We don't have to start doing that. I'm going to take the recording off. But I really do